Brought to you by Discovery Invest, the formula for successful investing. Brought to you by Discovery Invest, the formula for successful investing.
Welcome back. You're still watching our post-analysis of the 2017 budget. Now, clearly it highlighted the vast disparities in wealth among South Africans and the growing amount of those dependent on the state for their pensions. In this panel now, we focus on the importance of saving for your retirement, the personal finance angle of the budget for 2017. With me in studio are my guests who will provide us with insights. That's Craig Sher, Head of Research and Product Development at Discovery Invest, Wendy Foley, Advisory Partner for Citadel Wealth Management, and Samke Mhlongo-Ngwenya, Founder and Chief Executive Officer of TNC Wealth Partners. Good to have you with us in studio, ladies and gent. I would start off on the sore note and say, are we going to see any of you paying extra taxes, given the 45% tax bracket that's been added on? But perhaps we won't focus on that too much. But it is an interesting dynamic that it's been very pro the middle income earners and pro the poor. But however, those in the wealthier brackets seeing a slight pinch on their incomes going forward. Wendy?
Yeah, definitely. I think, the way that the Treasury has gone about filling the money that they need to put in the pot is actually by taxing the wealthier a lot more. So the tax bracket has gone up to 45% for those earning over 1.5 million rand. Dividends tax has also increased from 15% to 20%. So yeah, there definitely seems to be a drive to tax the wealthier.
On that note, does it seem as though the approach is they can afford it, so they can go ahead and pay a little bit extra instead of the concerns regarding how this might impact on their back pockets and the extra change they might have there? Samke, you want to share your points?
Yeah, I think Minister actually taxing the higher income bracket is in line with the wealth redistribution that they wanted to see, especially with the middle class in South Africa that is getting left behind and that is not growing fast enough for us to realize the transformation and wealth redistribution that we wanted to see in the country. So I think that approach is in line with that angle as well, that he did emphasize a lot on during his budget speech.
Very true. You did mention the dividends withholding tax, Wendy, and I want us to come back to that, and feel free to come in here as well, Craig, with regard to an interesting tweet that I saw that perhaps it defeats the purpose, because these are individuals who actually have the income, who are taking their personal finances into consideration, investing in the market, earning a return, and now have to pay additional tax on it. Is it a catch-22 where they're kind of hurting the positive objective that they actually want to achieve?
Well, I'm not too sure. I mean, as I said, it is a way to definitely generate more taxes, and I guess also it's generally your wealthier people who will be hurt by that. When I think of people who are in retirement funds, for example, while you're in a retirement fund, you don't pay any tax on interest or dividends earned. So, clearly it's not for your general person in the street, so to speak. I definitely think they are targeting the wealthier aspect of our population.
Let's talk about the general person in the street. You and I, who work hard every day for the little penny that we manage to get and invest in that. Retirement trends though, Craig, what are we seeing with regard to the South African dynamics? Are enough South Africans taking advantage of the current incentives that are actually provided by the government?
Well, I'd say definitely not. In fact, one of the positive things that come out of the budget is, if you were to look at it in a positive light, is because tax rates have gone up by quite significantly for those who are saving. Saving actually becomes far more attractive than it ever was before. As we said, you're getting this tax-free growth, you're getting tax deductions, and just by sort of not paying tax on that extra saving, it's far more attractive than it was before. But I think one of the things that we're definitely seeing is that generally people aren't saving enough. I mean, as a culture, as a South African culture, we're very bad at saving. If you look at us versus similar countries, the BRICS, we're like the worst savers out of all of them. And then on top of that, people are living longer. So if you think about it, if you start maybe earning when you're 25, you're going to retire at 65, or at 30 to 60, so you're going to spend 30 years of your life earning money. But because you're living longer, when you get to retirement, you're going to spend another 30 years or so in retirement. And that's much longer than it's ever been before. So it is absolutely, it's critical, this problem of longevity. I mean, whereas sort of from mankind is doing very well because we're living longer, and it's obviously very good for humanity. The problem, though, is that we don't have enough to live off in those final years when we get to retirement.
Mm-hmm. But are we seeing individuals being more likely to pick up, though, into this trend where they take a concerted effort to actually decide to save quite actively so for their retirement? And we'll come into the other options that are available on the market, like the tax-free savings account, where that cap has now been increased from 30,000 to 33,000 Rand per year, or I would assume just over $500,000 now over your lifetime.
I think the reality is that nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know, today I really feel like saving. It's not something that
I wish we could, huh? It's a tough feeling to kind of
it's not really what people do. So tax incentives are great, and I think they move in the right directions, and we have to have them. I mean, it's definitely the right thing to be doing. But I think one of the things that we focus on is really incentives. How do you get people to save and give them rewards for doing it? And we've been very successful in healthcare, you know, getting people to get healthier. And I think that world of sort of a carrot is definitely a good place to look.
Mm-hmm. Samke, let's get your views on the tax-free savings account. I would assume for anyone with children or looking for some kind of long-term saving or investment option, that's a great place for them to start.
It is, absolutely, and I think I'd like to disagree a little bit with Craig in that people don't, okay, maybe let me agree and disagree. So maybe they don't wake up saying that today I'm going to save, but I don't think people wake up saying I want to be in a financially vulnerable position. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, the stats show that 75% of South Africans don't have enough money to save at the end of the month. So it's a function of how do I budget, how do I make sure that I'm covering all my financial needs and then still saving. So of course the tax-free initiative has been rather successful with about 260,000 tax-free accounts open up to the end of Feb 2016, and with 21% of those estimated to be new savers. But that's not nearly enough to dent that over-indebted burden that South Africans sit with the World Bank report saying 86% of South Africans took out debt in 2015. And where was that money going? Healthcare, like you mentioned, starting a business, education. So it was also nice to see the touch from Minister on education and the concerted effort that's going to be made in terms of making sure that the basic literacy levels are increased in the education system, that there's technical colleges, you know, being funded to give alternatives to tertiary training as well, because a lot of people are spending their monies in those areas. That's why they don't have the ability to save for retirement. Mm-hmm.
Very true. Well, we'll certainly continue with this particular trend and how the budget is impacting our back pockets as consumers, looking at the investment options from retirement to overall savings and investing for the long term. We'll continue with this post-budget analysis right after the break.
Brought to you by Discovery Invest, the formula for successful investing. Brought to you by Discovery Invest, the formula for successful investing.
Welcome back. You're still watching this post-budget analysis here with us here on CNBC Africa, talking about the personal finance implications of the budget that we heard from the Minister just a moment ago. We also got some feedback from the Minister regarding transfer duty and the increase on that being elevated slightly from 750,000 to 900,000. Let's take a look at that very briefly.
The formula for
relief will be provided in the affordable housing market, and this is an important measure we are taking to support people in the middle income groups. through an increase in the threshold above which transfer duty is paid, or put it the other way, in the past, if you bought a house for 750,000 rands or less, no transfer duty was paid. And as the new tax year starts, if you buy a house for 900,000 rands and less, no transfer duty is to be paid.
What you hear there is a lot of applause, and clearly that particular segment being met with a great applause and positive reception from the crowd. I just wonder how many MPs actually purchase property for less than 900,000 rand. But on to us, ordinary South Africans, though. Slight reprieve coming through, but there are other elements that might work against the cost pressures and inflationary pressures for ordinary consumers, such as the sugar tax, the fuel levy. But how do we actually manage to balance all of these for the ordinary South African who's sitting there? Wendy?
So first of all, I think it's a fantastic development for the Minister to have increased the, to be able to buy a house for up to 900,000 rand and not pay transfer fees. It just encourages people to invest in property, which I think is great. The fact that sugar tax is going up is not a good thing for the consumer, and the fuel levy is not a good thing, because basically it means that the cost of goods will go up. And the general person in the street will say, well, with the increase in the cost of living, how can I actually afford to put money away? And I think that it's very important for people to actually speak to an advisor to say, this is my situation. The cost of living is more expensive. I'm aware that I need to save some money. How do I go about doing it, and what is the best way to do it? And the thing which comes to mind then is the tax-free savings account, which I think would be a great incentive for people, especially with children, as you mentioned earlier on. So, yeah, so that's what I think.
And that's exactly what we want to hear, the kind of guidelines that South African consumers can look towards with regard to some of these solutions. Samke, from your perspective as well, in trying to ensure that we manage this ever-tightening belt and cycle that we're in, are there other solutions that perhaps we could look to, given the pressures on the middle class? And the sandwich generation is one of particular interest to you.
Yeah, so definitely the impact of people not having enough retirement savings or enough monies to live comfortably and sustain their lifestyles, and having to depend on their children or their offspring is a cause that causes over-indebtedness, especially in sort of your 25 to 45-year-olds, which are the biggest owers in terms of the South African population group. And so when I hear things like that, it limits their ability, again, to have wealth transformation, because now that generation, instead of entering into good debt, like buying a home, they have all these pressures of either sending a sibling to school or having to take care of the medical costs for their parent. So I don't know how much of an impact raising the threshold, the transfer duty threshold to 900,000 will have, because those first-time homeowners that usually transact in the 600K to 900K space, how much of an ability to enter into a favorable home loan agreement do they have? Or will those properties be taken up by the wealthy in terms of 2 or 3 units at a time to rent out, okay, to that population group,
but
still
also
perpetuating.
Come to knowledge, though? They need to get out there, do their research, and actually speak to individuals who, have knowledge and expertise in those particular fields.
Definitely. I think if you are planning on actually changing the wealth trajectory of your life, you need to take some hard and painful decisions to ensure that you can buy a house, you can buy a car at favorable rates. We're in an interest rate cycle that's still not stable. Minister did mention that he will do whatever it takes to stave off a credit downgrade, and that may mean increasing interest rates. Of course, he doesn't want to do that, but that's one of the mechanisms that the Reserve Bank uses. So we do have to take very conscious and hard stances if we as individuals are going to also be responsible for transforming the wealth narrative of the African financial consumer.
Very true. To come to you, Craig, many South Africans out there are employed, those who are fortunate enough to actually probably invest in some kind of pension fund, provident fund, but ultimately there's some kind of contribution that they're making to their retirement savings. If I want to make sure that my retirement is intact, so that by the time I'm 65, I'm not told you actually don't have enough, what are the proactive steps that they can take right now?
Can I just say the most important thing that you can do is get someone to help you do this. I mean, if you think of in other worlds, when you're sick, you go to a doctor because he knows more about medicine than you do. When you want to learn to swim, you go to a swimming teacher. when you want to learn to save, I mean, I'll say quite openly, the financial world is a complex one. You know, it's a world of equities and bonds and cash and dividends and compound interest and tax, and it's a complicated world out there. So just getting on top of that is I suppose your first step, and helping you know, someone to help you along that way is one of the best investments that you can make. The balance between how much you're going to spend and how much you're going to save. It's very important to get someone to help you navigate that.
It's funny, we don't want to spend money on how to actually make more money. Funny how the attitudes of South Africans actually work. But on that note, coming back to the questions with regard to viewing your pension fund performance, looking at making sure that your investments are performing adequately in order to make sure that the long term is taken care of, are the initiatives that individuals can undertake. Wendy did mention speaking to one of your consultants to get further guidance.
I think that's right. The first step is speaking to someone and getting advice, and the second thing is understanding for yourself, and that's not really just, you know, understanding where your investments are going, but understanding how to maximize it. You know, taking control of your own destiny, making sure that when you're younger you have the right set of investments for someone who is younger, and as you get older have the right set of investments for someone who is older.
Is that still relevant in this day and age? And Wendy, feel free to come in here, because as you mentioned, longevity, people are living longer. So if my mother, who's 60, and I probably have a good 20 years ahead of us both, then maybe we both should be slightly more aggressive, right, in our investment strategy? Maybe not.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd agree with that. The number of people that are living past 100 years old is doubling every decade. So, you know, it's very possible that a lot of our viewers here will be past 100 years old by 2050, and all their friends will be there with them as well. So we have to make sure that you understand your investments for when you get to that age. And I do agree that you need, possibly means you have to be more risky, as we would say, when you're younger, and even when you're older, when you're 55, you should probably also have enough assets in there that can grow. You know, you mustn't be too focused on the short term. You know, assets can do, your money can do anything when you invest it over the short term. It might fall, it might rise, but if you've got a very long-term outlook, now which most savers should have, then you should be able to ride out those waves. Just make sure that your course is correct, and you'll be in line for the right retirement.
Wendy, I wanted to come to you to get more perspective on that note with regard to the investment strategies. Is that what you're seeing with your clients doing now, actually?
So for me, it's very, every individual is different. So there's no one solution that fits everybody. When it comes to older people who are nearing retirement, I don't necessarily go all gun-ho and go equity, because the question is how much can they afford to lose in their older years. And generally they can't really afford to lose that much, so I go a little bit more conservatively with them. But definitely with younger people who are starting out, I mean, they really should be taking a lot of risk with their investments, and by that I mean having exposure to equities, and not just locally. I think South Africa forms 0.6% of the global markets. It's tiny. So it's very important, and especially now while the rand is quite strong, to actually invest offshore, to get that offshore exposure across different countries, and to watch your money grow. But it is a plan that will be different for everybody. Depending on their needs.
Out of interest, though, we did hear the minister also addressing the fact that they're trying to make sure that the middle income earners, who are fundamentally individuals who work hard for their money, also make sure that they see sustainable wealth growth and wealth transfer between themselves and future generations. It would be interesting to gauge from your perspective and the clients that you interact with as to how they do that adequately versus those who are still in the middle income segment, trying to get to that new level of wealth creation and wealth transfer. Are there interesting nuances as to how we get things done correctly, or the typical pitfalls that might be experienced?
With regards to building your wealth?
Building and transfer of wealth, because it's one thing to build it, but at the same time we're trying to build legacies here for our families.
Well, I think one of the things that I've seen with the wealthy is that, especially if they've made their own wealth, and you have to take your hat off to them, but their spending habits are also quite high. And that's something which, to an extent, you have to actually have a look at. And if, it doesn't really matter that much if they spend a lot, if they don't want to leave a legacy and they don't want to leave money to their children. So we look at what is the family unit all about? do we need to maybe set up structures for them to house their wealth for future generations? So maybe put in place a trust or something like that. So I'd say definitely the solutions for your wealthier people are quite different to the solution for the normal person in the street. But nonetheless, there is a solution for both of them.
I want those solutions. I'm hoping we get those solutions. And that's exactly what I want to come to, Samke, because you also speak to an audience of individuals who are in the middle income, but want to get to that point where they can afford the yachts and the exorbitant lifestyle and wealth transfer for their future generations. Are there lessons that or themes that you've identified with regard to this so far?
So the definition of wealth is actually changing, and people aren't actually now wanting to get yachts or own private jets and fly first class. They're actually now having aspirations of securing their current financial position and securing their current financial lifestyle. And I think that there's a lot to be said in then helping people to almost protect their income or protect their lifestyle, and then save accordingly and make the necessary adjustments to be able to protect that level of lifestyle that they've become accustomed to. So it's no longer a race to the top, but more, I'm comfortable where I am. How do you make sure that with the changing economic climate or the volatility in the market, I can still go shopping at my favorite store, or eat the organic foods that I'm used to, or travel once a year overseas? So that's more the narrative that is now coming through in terms of how people define wealth, as opposed to a race to the yachts.
Some of us are a bit too ambitious, right? Maybe. But an interesting point to leave it on. Thank you so much, Craig, for coming through and sharing your insights too, because that's exactly what we want individuals to maintain the lifestyles that they live when they're working, as they do in their retirement. But we'll have to leave it there for our conversation today. The post-budget analysis on savings and retirement, and overall wealth and personal financial management for ordinary South Africans. A big thank you to my guests, Craig Sher, Head of Research and Product Development at Discovery Invest, Wendy Foley, Advisory Partner at Citadel Wealth Management, and Samke Mhlongo-Ngwenya, Founder and Chief Executive of TNC Wealth Partners.